Diva not. Stop. Just stop what you're doing and tag a Dominicana on this post. This is her story. This is for the women who welcomed me to New York City in 1998. Dominicanas paved the road for their sisters since the 1960s. Their community-based organizations provide immigrant services, including healthcare, that the government at large denies non-residents. Dominicanas are unique among Latinas in that they often migrate alone and the head of their families, engaging in a phenomenon known as transnational motherhood. It is their remittances that sustain whole families on the island. If children are present with these divas in the United States, they are likelier than other Latinx to spend summers with abuela in the Dominican Republic, making transnational abuelahood. That's right, I'ma learn you that Dominicanas and Dominicanidad is and always will be a matriarchy of butterflies. Check out the episode. Salve, Divano, and welcome to Cronista de Indias, the Her Story YouTube channel by Dr. Andrea Lorena Fernandez. Más criolla que la arepa, that's right. Please subscribe and follow on Instagram. Check out the podcast, Why Do We Read This?, which I co-host with Dr. Rebecca Saloa from Baruch College on classics and pop culture. Links in the description. Thank you for supporting my research. In the last episode 26, titled Eva Perón, on women's right to vote and performing national motherhood, we discussed feminism, suffrage, and Argentina until 1946, Peronism, a brief summary from 46 to 1955, and on women's right to vote, a radio speech by Evita in 1947. Lastly, we reviewed her autobiography from 1951. In this episode, disclaimer, this is not a video bio on the Mirabal sisters, but a critical analysis on what they represent to the women's movement. This one is titled The Butterflies, the Mirabal sisters, Megalomania, and Santo Domingo's Obelisco Macho. First, we'll review an analysis of the Alegoria of Freedom, a mural on Santo Domingo's male obelisk by Dustin Muñoz. Second, I'll discuss Patria, Minerva, María, Teresa, and Dedé Mirabal within the context of the Chicas Modernas theory now applied to Dominicanas. Third, I'll discuss Megalomania, Fascism and Gender, the Sea of Lentils theory by Antonio Benítez Rojo. A little known secret. I was a JetBlue flight attendant from 2009 to 2013 while I got my master's degree. This is how I paid for it. If you're lucky enough to land in Santo Domingo's Las Americas airport just right, you might catch a glimpse of the colorful obelisk on the Avenida George Washington. This is also known as El Malecón by the locals. The murals by Dustin Muñoz are very striking. They take your breath away. The monument's four faces total 17.3 meters in width and 38.783 meters in height, the largest mural ever made in the Dominican Republic. For Dominicans and fans of Dominican studies, the number 4 automatically is associated with the Mirabal sisters. This obelisk is inaugurated in 1937 during the Rafael Leonidas Trujillo's bloodstained reign, which lasted from 1930 to 61. It was made by Alfonso González Sánchez and Rafael García Boñel y Washington. At the time, the city and its baseball team were called Trujillo City. That's right. Renaming Santo Domingo does not make you Alexander the Great, nor does an obelisk make a pharaoh, but Rafael Leonidas Trujillo was bent on this pathological megalomania. The country and his people were his to will. See In the Time of the Butterflies movie in the description. I'll throw a link on there. They call it Obelisco Macho because in 1947, to celebrate the end of owing money to the USA, which lasted a whole 5 minutes, Trujillo commissioned the Obelisco Hembra, the female version, just down the street. The main difference between these two obelisks is that the male is phallic and the female looks like a pair of legs splitting into the air like in Art Deco. Yeah, I can't make this shit up, go look it up. Trujillo was gendering and appropriating urbanscape and the mindscape of the Dominican Republic, both. On the east face, a woman dressed in the Dominican tricolor flag with a red headband saying República Dominicana. On her left hand, she holds a branch for freedom, and on the right, the national flag flies over her head that encompasses the three other faces of the obelisk. Patria, or fatherland, observes three butterflies, truth, liberty, and peace. The white dove at the top reads Dios, Patria y Libertad. The northern face of the obelisk features a woman crowned with laurels for immortality, reading the Gospel of John, chapter 8, verse 32. Ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free, while the cross behind her represents the Christian nation. She holds pre-Columbian symbols and a wheel symbolizing the progress of history. The western face features three women cutting a cord representing the island's past steeped in blood, fear, and horror. The bottom woman bears a coffee plant crown for the hard work and hands the cord to the next. The middle woman wears a flag and a flower crown. With her right hand, she holds a pair of scissors and the left a scale for justice. The third woman at the top holds the cord and watches a dove for peace. This woman has a pen in her hand, symbolizing women's intellect. The southern face has a lady flute player performing the national anthem wearing a flag. Here, there are butterflies too, but they are faded towards the top. The Mirabal sisters, presumably honored on this monument, would have hardly liked the mural's message. It excludes Dominicanas from the national project based only on their reproductive functions. The artist explains in his website, quote, "The mural is an homage to the contributions of women to liberty in different roles, from the very creation of our national flag and the independence wars, as well as education, letters, work, progress, arts, and culture in general. It is an homage also to those women whom we may crown with flowers because day to day they accomplish in their homes humanity's greatest labor. Caring for the future, represented by our boys and girls contributing with this to the peace and freedom through the formation of truly sensible beings," unquote. All right, there are so many problems with this statement of national maternalism. So let's point some of them out. Quote, "Women in different roles, but all the jobs described are domestic, maternal, and service-oriented." All right, not so inclusive. "Women whom we may crown with flowers, but only if you're a mother. Get the fuck out of here. You're not part of the national project otherwise." 3, accomplish in their homes. Okay, so Dominicanas are some of the most hard-working people I know. Go ahead, tell her to stay home. Let me know how that goes for you. You're gonna get the chancla, mijo. Patria, Minerva, María Teresa, and Dedé are Chicas, Modernas, Dominicanas. A brief biography. Check out the movie that makes this all the more couchable. See In the Time of the Butterflies, that features Salma Hayek and Mark Anthony. It's actually a very entertaining movie. There's also Tropics of Blood. Hang tight. These are Las Mariposas, the Dominican Republic's anti-fascist squad. The Mirabal sisters were 4 Dominicanas, known commonly as Patria, Minerva, María Teresa, and Dedé, who opposed the dictatorship of Rafael Leonidas Trujillo, also self-appointed El Jefe, and were involved in clandestine activities against his regime. Nothing to do with mothering. 3 of the 4 sisters, Minerva, Patria, and María Teresa, were assassinated on November 25th, 1960. The last sister, Dedé, died of natural causes in 2014. The assassinations turned the Mirabal sisters into symbols of both popular and feminist resistance. In 1999, in the sisters' honors, the United Nations General Assembly designated November 25th as the International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women. Everything that we've been saying about experimental womanhood of the 1920s and 1950s in Mexico in the Cronista de Indias channel applies also to the Mirabal sisters, accepting the social unrest of the Mexican Revolution. They were the first Dominicana generation to 1. Attend secular primary, secondary, and, in Minerva's case, higher education. 2. Archival photographs show them in trousers, driving, smoking cigarettes, and wearing lipsticks in different shades, meaning that they were integrated into the consumer culture of radionovelas, like Evita, lifestyle magazines, and drugstore makeup because of close ties between the Dominican Republic and Uncle Sam. 3. They are the first generation to actually expect a life in the public eye, not just domesticity. So this obelisk saying that only Dominicanas who are mothers get to be honored, screw that. The Mirabal sisters are the transitional figures between first and second wave feminism in Latin America. If you remember from previous episodes, and if you don't, that's okay, go back and check it out. First wave feminism in Latin America pertains to higher education, suffrage, and widowhood that permeated throughout the 19th century civil wars. Second wave feminism, on the other hand, is a gradual transition into workers' rights, birth control, and, for Latinas, surviving terror states. You see, after the Cuban Revolution of 1959, U.S. hostility towards the USSR manifested itself in interventionist policies throughout the 20th century and today to prevent the spread of communism. These policies included supporting tyrannical dictators so long as they espouse right-wing, laissez-faire style economics dependent on U.S. capital. This created an asymmetrical economy wherein the Dominican Republic supplies the USA with raw material, say coconuts, and the USA resells these abroad and to Dominicans themselves as a manufactured good for 5 times the price. This trade-off ensures the stability of Latin America's criollo elite, sometimes called an oligarchy because they're usually related, at the expense of the collective. Repression spans anything from censorship of the media to clandestine disappearances. The Dominican Republic and Cuba until 1959 was technically the USA's laboratory for dictators. Rafael Leonidas Trujillo is an early permutation of Augusto Pinochet in Chile, who reigned from 1973 to 89, and Alfredo Stroessner of Paraguay from 1954 to 89. Note the year that both of the above dictators end, 1989, the fall of the Berlin Wall and the USSR. This is not an accident. Women are at the forefront of political activism against Latin American terror states by accident. We gotta face it. Political violence disproportionately targets men. That's why the massacre of the Mirabal sisters was so unnerving and the nail in Trujillo's coffin. It also means that when men disappear, mothers and grandmothers are politicized in their frantic search to find information. You can take Uganda's and Chile's legislature as examples, as the majority of representatives are women in their 50s and 60s because the males of that age group were eliminated in the dirty wars of the 1970s and 1980s. The third topic for today's lesson features megalomania, fascism and gender, the sea of lentils theory. Megalomania is having a grandiose sense of self. Why is the Dominican Republic a laboratory for globalization? Well, it has to do with some common traits between the islands, according to Antonio Benitez Rojo. He's an anthropologist, author of The Sea of Lentils. The Caribbean islands are like lentils. Yay! They seem like alike when you look at them from afar, but up close, you see the differences between one sister and the other. So some of the things these lentil sister islands have in common are that there's hardly any manufacturing. They're products of neocolonialism and monoculture. The Dominican Republic, for example, has moved from coffee and now exports baseball players. There's also no urban workforce, no proletariat mentality. Most people live in rural areas, and there's no real ethnic aristocracy like on the mainland because African descendants constitute a majority of the population on the islands. Strategic positioning is also appealing. The island has been occupied by Spain, France, Britain, and the USA. Plantations lead to colonialism, which leads to mercantilism, which leads to independence and later neocolonialism. The USA's dollar diplomacy in the Caribbean leads to mild economic growth in World War I and II. Latin America and the Caribbean constitute the Western Bloc during the Cold War, much like Poland and Romania are the Eastern one. The archipelago doesn't end because of the diaspora. Quisqueya is also Santo Domingo, is also Santo Domingo, and República Dominicana, and New York, New Jersey, Florida, Maine, Rhode Island, Pennsylvania, and Connecticut. Here are some important dates that also reveal that an archipelago in events spans the continent's northernmost latitudes from the island and above through the diaspora. First is the colonial period from 1492 to 1606. The disencounter, the first European colony in the Americas. From 1605 to 1606, the French occupied the western part of the island that becomes Santo Domingo. In 1613, Juan Rodriguez arrives in Hudson Harbor just up the block on a Dutch ship, the first Latino and Black men to cohabitate with the Lenape nation that will become New York City. Yes, Dominicans beat everyone else excepting the Dutch over to the island of Manhattan. In 1697, the Spanish legitimized the French control of Saint Domingue. Let's go over the birthdays of the Dominican Republic. Maybe 1804 is the first one with the Haitian Revolution, led by self-emancipated slaves to eradicate the French. Or maybe it's 1821 with the Haitian invasion of Santo Domingo that declares the first independence from Spain. Or maybe it's 1844 with the Dominican independence from Haiti. Or maybe it's 1861 to 65 with the second independence from Spain. Hold on a minute, side quest. In 1892, the first Dominicans arrive on Ellis Island up the other block, meaning that they also beat other Europeans here. The third period in Dominican history that we would like to highlight is the neo-colonial period starting in 1898 with the Spanish-American War that began the USA's intervention in the Caribbean. In 1912, foreign debt, oligarchic infighting, and rebellions incur USA threats of occupation. In 1916 to 24, the USA occupies the Dominican Republic under Woodrow Wilson in World War I. From 1924 to 1930, there is a puppet government by this guy, Horacio Vázquez, the builder. Otherwise he's inconsequential. Then comes the big deal, the Trujillato, from 1930 to 1961. Rafael Leonidas Trujillo, with close ties to the USA, wins presidential elections with a terror campaign, institutes a one-party dictatorship, and liberal economic policies that favored US capital. In 1937, he inaugurates the Obelisco Macho cited above. In 1947, this Obelisco Macho gets its hembra down the block, really, the female obelisk, for real. In 1960, the massacre of the Mirabal sisters triggers his death. Fourth time period, the diaspora, beginning in 1962, Juan Bosch wins the first democratic elections in 30 years. I kind of like this president because he was actually a great storyteller and better president than most other heads of state. This is more than I can say for most heads of state in Latin America, but he was overthrown in 1963 by a military coup that remade the constitution. In 1965, the revolution pitches the constitucionalistas versus the trujillistas, and the USA intervenes again. Now, because they're scared of Castro, but they didn't seem to need much of an excuse to begin with intervention in 1898. 1965 is also the Family Reunification Immigration Act in the USA. Dominicans were invited to live in the USA to lighten the load of poor people on the island and thus prevent another Cuban revolution. The result? Spanish Harlem up the other block. I'm in Brooklyn. More on that in the next episode. I'll actually address Spanish Harlem separately. Las Mariposas and their contributions to the Dominican Republic's national ethos correspond to the characteristics of the Sea of Lentils theory as described by Antonio Benítez Rojo. First, they are non-apocalyptical. What exists doesn't die, merely transforms. Now, I know this sounds like the first law of thermodynamics, but I swear it's social theory. Patria, Minerva, María Teresa, and Dedé are literally butterflies, the animal that reinvents itself from a lowly worm into a spectacle. They represent renewal and transformation in Lukumi, Yoruba, Taino, and Catholic cosmographies. 2. The Mirabal sisters are aquatic bound. The thing about water is that it leaks when it's insidious. While the Dominican Republic is water-bound because it literally is like an island, the mariposas operated clandestinely to oppose Trujillo and eventually cracked the dictatorship, like little drops will carve a stone. Their death made it to look like an accident was a watershed, and I intend the pun, a watershed moment when the Dominican Republic transitioned from fascism to imperfect democracy. But a democracy, it's a little bit better. At least it's not a terror state anymore. 3. Performance as ritual and syncretism. Island cultures are ritualistic, argues Antonio Benítez Rojo. The same act of going to Mass every Sunday morning persists regardless of social unrest. Islanders find comfort in these repetitive habits that ritualize their culture and make it shock-proof. The Mirabal sisters, when they weren't in prison, still performed the Chicas Modernas experimental womanhood of the early 20th century. They syncretized the new, like cigarettes, with traditional quinceañeras. The next is the element of surprise. Back to their deaths as a catalyst for social change and global awareness of violence against women. Nobody expects the Caribbean to surprise, being so ritualistic, yet it does this shit at least every 2 decades. Surprise? Revolution? Last, the Caribbean is the unwilling womb of globalization. I have no idea if any of the Mirabal sisters had children. I vaguely recall a documentary where Minerva's daughter is congresswoman, but not sure. Either way, on the Obelisco Macho's Alegoria of Liberty mural, their contributions to Dominican freedom seem reduced to motherhood. We are so much more than our wombs, yet national projects have but one use for us: reproduce while looking pretty and patriotic. Fuck that. In this episode of Latin American Divas, we celebrated the butterflies, the Mirabal sisters, in the context of Megalomania and Santo Domingo's Obelisco Macho. First, we analyzed the Alegoria de la Libertad, the mural on Santo Domingo's male obelisk by Dustin Muñoz. Second, we did a little discussion on Patria, Minerva, María Teresa, and Dedé as Chicas, Modernas, Dominicanas. See episode 20 for more info on that. And third, we discussed megalomania, fascism, and gender using the Sea of Lentils theory developed by Antonio Benítez Rojo. In the next episode, 28, we're going to study one of my favorite mythological creatures in the whole wide world, La Ciguapa, Dominicanas, diaspora, and community development in New York City since 1965. Thank you so much, and all the arepas in the world for taking the time to learn about Latin American divas right here at Cronista de Indias with La Doctora Andrea Lorena Fernandez. Please hit the subscribe button so you may never miss an episode and help me out in keeping this channel going with a like and a comment below. As always, a million thanks for viewing, liking, and sharing the episodes. Tag your favorite Dominicana, and as always, do epic shit.